Welcome in. College football is back at the FCS level, and I'm here to help you out as long as we are here. And welcome in the FCS Football Show. Matt Joseph's here, sportsmemo.com, and joining me now is Rob Veno of WagerTalk.com. And Rob, we're not going to waste any time here. We've got FCS football. It has a bad stigma, I think, amongst a lot of college football fans, Rob. But just tell some people what they can expect these coming weeks with the FCS football season.
Well, I think, Matt, for those who don't watch it, the way guys like you and I watch it, there's some tremendous football conferences that you'll find here starting with this weekend. You get thrown right into the fire with the best of the best. The Missouri Valley, obviously a terrific football conference. I think that the Colonial, certainly the Southern, a good conference. So you're going to see good competitive football for the most part in all aspects of the FCS here. I think that, people don't really recognize player names, Matt, at this level until possibly they hit the NFL or until possibly or maybe they were transferred down. I know Ben DiNucci, a pretty good example at JMU from Pitt. People might have known him from the Panthers, then they see him at JMU and notice him. But there's talent here, skill position-wise, defensive-wise, and I just think in all, that what you're going to see is some pretty good competitive football at this level. It's good that it's being played separately, I think, at this time of year from FBS, because people will get a chance to look at it and get a pretty good grasp of what's going on with FCS. But I know I enjoy it. I mean, to me, it's as good as any, lower rung conference FBS competition. We tend to like the MAC. Some of this stuff is as good as MAC football. So I think for us, you and I, it's real good to have it here as a solo sport for football. And I think people will come to enjoy it, especially, when it's got a point spread attached to it, Matt, and a total, it always becomes more interesting for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. We've seen the excitement level for KBO. People were not going to bet on KBO baseball before, but when they're, you put a line on something, and with more and more states legalizing sports betting. So with this FCS season, obviously there's some challenges, Rob. We went through it with the FBS season. There's going to be COVID things. There's going to be last minute changes. We're also in the winter season, and there's a fall season still to come for a lot of these schools. They're going to play in both. So Rob, just give us a little bit of an overview. Last year, this past season with the FBS, what can you carry over there that you use for your COVID-related handicapping that you're going to bring to this?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Matt, because last year you tended to wait longer and longer, especially when it comes to selection service releases, right? You just can't open up when the lines come out. In this case, I think we saw lines universally Wednesday afternoon. So Wednesday afternoon, you see numbers. You really can't just fly off the handle and bet these things strong until you know exactly who's in and who's out. And college information, much tougher to come by than professional information. So it makes it tough on us. I know it was a difficult hurdle during the FBS season. It'll be another difficult hurdle here. The weather cancellations this week, obviously the North Dakota teams had it right all along when they built domes, right? Let's play in a dome and not worry about weather. But yeah, I think where COVID concerns go, they're very much the same as they were in FBS. A lot of coaches on the FBS level were extremely tight to the vest. In fact, I would say the majority of coaches were extremely tight to the vest, about 80%. There were some, Lane Kiffin, a good example down at Ole Miss, where you could get some info out of him early in the week and kind of know the direction his team was headed personnel-wise. We'll see. One thing I can't say is that I know a lot of tendencies of the head coaches where information is concerned. That'll be a learning process as we go along here, but it's certainly something to look for. I would treat it the same as I did FBS.
Yeah, and certainly, I'll say this. This past season, the Central Arkansas Austin Peay game got in early on Austin Peay. found out game day that the star wide receiver, the long snapper, and offensive lineman, like defensive linemen, were out. And of course, the line moves. I got a bad line. And of course, they didn't cover, and it was a terrible way. And I agree with you. A lot of the picks that I'm going to make in these games are going to be day of, and which is why you want to get an all access package for either Rob or I on WagerTalk for Rob and Sports Memo for me. And certainly, the other thing I feel like I need to bring up here, Rob, is that there are some teams that are going to use this as true winter practice, and they're going to get themselves ready for the fall. Listening to the Richmond football coach, there may be a chance that he's going to start playing some younger guys and starting to get them ready for the actual fall season. Whereas I've talked to people at JMU who are like, we're trying to win a championship. We're going to go right out of the gate. We're going to play the best players. We're going to do this. So that's the other thing I think, Rob, people need to know about is what are the intentions and reading quotes and things for these coaches as to how they're going to attack this shortened season.
Information always key, Matt, and where that's concerned, obviously, that's a big thing to know. I think that the FCS playoff bracket, if I read it right, is even whittled down further for this spring season. There are not going to be as many teams making the playoffs. So, just as we see in some college basketball aspects, or at least talk of teams that aren't going anywhere, potentially opting out, that sort of goes to what you're telling the audience here of teams that don't believe that they're going to make this playoff may use it as that springboard into fall. Certainly when you can dig it up, and I know the two of us, we try to scour, boy, as much as you can. The info just not as readily available when it comes to these smaller schools, but you have to dig to find out what these intentions are, and certainly that'll be a big thing this year. The power teams that know they're going to be in championship contention, you can count on them. These smaller teams that may not, or teams that are 500 or below, may not have those same intentions. Good point.
Last general thing we get to before we get to our 3 games for this week. This match this week and probably some of next week, we're going to see teams who played in the fall against teams who have not played in the fall. For example, the Austin Peay team that I mentioned. There's a couple other teams who, even if they played just one game, North Dakota State played one game, they at least played in the fall. How do you attack a matchup where you have teams that played in the fall against teams who are just getting underway?
I think it's an advantage. Southern Illinois comes to mind. We'll talk about them. I think they played one game against Southeast Missouri State. They win that game on a last-second field goal, but it was probably a good thing to have practice week, to have game situation. I think it can only be helpful. There's a bunch of teams, Matt, I know that played fall ball instead of spring ball. I wish they were back. Teams I know you and I have texted back and forth about. Houston Baptist played a lot of games. You wish Houston Baptist was on the board. There's some Southland schools, Central Arkansas team that you talked about that played some games and won't be playing here. But I think right off the bat, we are faced with one in Southern Illinois, and I do think it's somewhat of an advantage for those few teams that had some fall experience, some fall practice time in this spring season. I think it'll be a slight advantage. I would give them that from a handicapping angle.
Yeah, and certainly you mentioned Houston Baptist. Unfortunately, if they were going to play, most of their good players did transfer out. They went up to the FBS level. I think most of them went to Western Kentucky. So that was unfortunate, but a lot of fun. All right, so most weeks we're going to do 3 to 5 games. We're going to attack them from different perspectives and put a little bit more into them. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it's going to be a lot of the same teams too. I mean, there's, as you talked about, the CAA, the Missouri Valley, the Southern Conference. There's going to be a lot of games involving them, and we've got a good one coming up on Friday night. South Dakota State, a top 5 team. They are going to hit the road and take on Northern Iowa. This game is going to be an 8 o'clock kickoff. It's on ESPN Plus, where a lot of these games are. South Dakota State opened up as about a 3.5-point favorite, total 42.5. Some of those numbers have come down. There might be a 3 somewhere, but it's mostly 2.5. And Rob, couple things here. 15% capacity. It'll be about 2,500 fans for Northern Iowa, something we're going to watch as we go on. 2,500 may be starting to get some sort of a little bit of home field advantage. These two teams played last year. South Dakota State won 38-7 in their matchup the first time, and then they lost to them in the playoffs 13-10. So these two teams are very familiar with each other. Let's start out with this matchup, Rob. What are you looking for?
Yeah, and Matt, the small amount of fans inside of a dome, that noise could be magnified, right? So certainly 2,500 doesn't sound like a big number, but when it's all enclosed, you find that noise level could get up there. The most recent obviously meeting, as you talked about, was the second round playoff meeting where UNI wins 13-10. These two teams are so much mirror images of each other, but I think for South Dakota State, and we'll try to get the audience some of the bigger names on these teams so you have guys to look for here. But in the case of South Dakota State, they'll get their number one quarterback, Jabari Gibbs, back this season after missing 2019 or the majority of it due to an injury. Excellent dual threat quarterback, solid running quarterback, a good passer as well. And you can see South Dakota State possibly leaning a little bit more toward 50-50 play calling this year with the ability of Gibbs to run RPOs and that type of thing. So that's certainly a plus for him. I guess, Matt, the subtraction there or the counter to that would be after not taking the field for so long and then having to face this Northern Iowa team, how effective will he be? That's just one of many questions that as handicappers will have going into all of these games. Both of these teams tremendous defensively. I give a slight lean to UNI where defense is concerned. I think their run defense probably a little bit better than South Dakota State, but both of these teams upper tier elite FCS defenses right now. For Northern Iowa, quarterback may be a small advantage for them, even though Gibbs is coming back for South Dakota State. Will McIlvain, a lot of people think might be the best quarterback back in the MVC. Now that Trey Lance is gone, or MVFC, I guess I'm supposed to say. In basketball, it's MVC, but here it's the football conference. Breaking it down, there's not a whole heck of a lot that I found that would create margin or a selection that I would really want to run out and play right away. UNI has the little things, a couple of little things, to me at least, that South Dakota State doesn't. They both can run the football. For South Dakota State, you're going to run it with Pierre Strong Jr., back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. Northern Iowa is a run-oriented team, but they do have the one receiver that South Dakota State doesn't in this matchup. So maybe if we're looking for a big play possibility through the air, that could end up on South Dakota State's side. Power rating wise, let's start with this game open 3.5. My power rating showed South Dakota State only 1.5. It was real tough, Matt, for me to go through and make power ratings for the teams that are going to play in FCS this year. They haven't played since 2019. What are you going to do with a lot of these teams? So you go with what you see on paper. I think that Northern Iowa at home is probably the right side at this price, even though South Dakota State will have a bit of a revenge angle. And I know Northern Iowa's head coach said that they would have to match SDSU's fire from the very start of this game, even though SDSU's on the road. He's worried somewhat about tackling. There hasn't been a lot of live work. So in order to tackle strong, they have to be on their game from the get-go. And for UNI, if there is a concern aside from that, it would be the defensive backfield where their head coach called them a bit unsettled at this time, especially at the safety positions. All that being said, I think I would lean plus points with the home team, UNI.
Yeah, I agree. You mentioned the quarterback situation, and we heard from the coach last week, John Stiegelmeier, who is the head coach at South Dakota State. He said he hasn't really picked a quarterback yet. You know, there is the Keaton Hyde, who's also in the mix. And then, 2 weeks ago, he was talking about the true freshman Mark Gronowski, who got all the reps and gave out the quote, basically, quote, there are things going on with Jay Bohr and Keaton, quote, end quote, within a week we'll pick a guy. And so there is that uncertainty. And if they're going to throw the true freshman out there, A, he's got to be good because he's going up against other quarterbacks. But B, it could be his first game action. And he's going up against a Northern Iowa team that has held 11 of their opponents last year to 14 points or less. So I have a lean to Northern Iowa. And once again, as we talk about here, it's a lean as of the time that we put this video out, and things will change. And if there's line movement and stuff like that, if there's COVID things, that'll certainly be. And so what we're going to at least try and do is give you the information to give you the fact that you can decide if you want. And once again, as always, Rob, you could pass on any game. This is college football when there's college basketball, hockey, golf, tennis, all this stuff. If you don't like the game just because it's standalone on Friday night, you don't have to bet it.
No, that's certainly the case, Matt. And I know the urge and the temptation always with a solo game on a Friday night is to go ahead and play. If you do, all we can ever do is encourage you, and especially through the way that we manage bankrolls with our selection services, to play it responsibly. But I didn't talk, or neither of us really hit quick on the total in that game, Matt. And if it were me, I think I'd probably look toward under. Just feel like the defenses are the strongest units on the field here, and perhaps you could see a lot of turnovers that create points. That's something that you can't avoid with this long of a layoff between games, something we can't actually project. But I think maybe you and I, and maybe a small look at the under.
Yeah, and certainly I would even go shorter, maybe go first quarter or first half under as both sides get the kinks out after the long off season. All right, game number 2. We're staying in the Missouri Valley, the MVFC as you refer to it. And this game is on Saturday. Southern Illinois is on the road. They are taking on North Dakota. This is a 1 o'clock kickoff. ESPN Plus is the channel for this one. Southern Illinois opened up as about a 4.5-point favorite. Total 48.5. It's a lot of threes now. And when you look at this matchup, you've got a North Dakota team that was picked 7th in the preseason poll against a SIU team that was picked to finish 5th. And don't forget, as you mentioned, SIU does have a game under their belt. They got the rivalry in. They beat SEMO 20-17 back on October 30th. And I really love Kari Lyles at quarterback, and certainly he'll be a factor in this matchup, Rob.
Yeah, it's a big advantage there, right? Because for UND, they not only lose their starting quarterback, their starting running back, they're replacing their top 2 wide receivers. So there's a lot of skill position talent that's being replaced on North Dakota's side. All that being said, you read some articles and you find that the Alarus Center, we're going to become accustomed to a lot of the names of these fields and domes in FCS. It'll be rocking for North Dakota, which gets into the Missouri Valley after playing 2 years as an independent, prior to that being in the Big Sky. But they have faced these teams, these Missouri Valley teams, certainly because of geographic location throughout the years. Last year, the team that they played was North Dakota State. That game was an absolute blowout, Matt, and I just want to really quick here go through the numbers of that game. It wasn't really close statistically. The South Dakota State team was beaten, or excuse me, the North Dakota team was beaten by North Dakota State by 230 plus yards. They were outrushed, beaten terribly at the line of scrimmage. And I know Southern Illinois is not North Dakota State defensively. They're not Northern Iowa defensively. They're not South Dakota State defensively, but they are very good defensively. You can go deep into this conference and get really good defenses. And I think that'll be an issue for North Dakota here, will be running the football. In fact, both lines of scrimmage will probably be issues for North Dakota in this game, because Southern Illinois does have a pretty fierce pass rush as well coming back. So a couple of things here. North Dakota, can they protect their quarterback? And number 2, can they stop, or can they match in the trenches against the Southern Illinois offensive line, which will likely look to unleash their ground game right off the bat. Their top running back, freshman last year, sophomore this year, but over 1,000 yards rushing as a freshman. So for Southern Illinois, a very good run game. They've got the ability to throw the ball as well. You talked about Lyles, the quarterback here, came from Wisconsin as a transfer a couple years back. It's interesting to me, Matt, that he wears number 3. I get a little Russell Wilson vibe out of him, as in that might be his hero or something, but there's a lot of family attachments to that program. The advantage at quarterback here between first-time starter and between Lyles, to me, is huge. Like I say, the trench battle I have written down or noted as the biggest key to the game on both sides. I think Southern Illinois, they came up as a 6-point favorite in my power ratings, opened 4.5, and were immediately bet down. So there's North Dakota money out there. I just don't know that excitement level, the motivation to get back into the MVC and show well at home first time out. I just don't know that that comes into play enough to me. That's all situational stuff that could evaporate by the end of the first quarter. To me, Southern Illinois is the better team, And I would look that way, especially at this reduced price.
Yeah, I agree. And even if you don't want to necessarily lay the 3, you could look and try and shop around for an affordable money line. There are things to do if you don't feel necessarily comfortable with the 3. But you're right. Tommy Schuster, the new quarterback for North Dakota, he appeared in 3 games as a true freshman last year. And so he appeared in 3 games. That doesn't even mean he's done a lot in those 3 games. And as we said, 4,000 fans in this game, 32% capacity. So there will be some excitement for this game. But I mean, I think, as you said, that excitement wears off. And I also like Southern Illinois. With a line move like this, we'll just do a little bit more digging and things like that, see if there's any sort of injuries, any sort of opt-outs or things like that. But yeah, I agree. If this thing keeps falling, Southern Illinois becomes more and more of a value there. All right, game 3. This is on Sunday, and that's right. So we're going to have most weekends in the FCS, we're going to have games Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. For the most part, Sunday will be the OVC, although a couple of those games are getting postponed due to the weather. This one, not from the OVC, it's from the MVFC. And so we're going to continue on with this. And it's Youngstown State at North Dakota State. North Dakota State opening up as a 25-point favorite. Total is 54. Kickoff for this one, 3:30. It's NBC North Dakota or ESPN Plus. These two teams played last year. One of the worst losses at home campus for Youngstown State, 56-17. And Rob, when we first take a look at this matchup, first off, no Trey Lance. They gave him his one game in the fall. He played in that game. They beat Central Arkansas 39-28. It's Zeb Noland's team. And then you look at Youngstown State, 6 players who played in that season finale in 2019 are back. That's it. 6 starters, excuse me. So Youngstown State, a young team that's going to have to go into the Fargo Dome, and we've seen plenty of teams go and wilt in the Fargo Dome.
Yeah, and not only is it a new team, Matt, but it's a new team with a new coaching staff, with a new offensive system, with a new defensive system. Now, head coach Doug Phillips, who's never been a head coach until he takes the field for this game. I think he was running backs coach for the Cincinnati Bearcats, takes this job. Obviously, one of my favorite coaches of all, Bo Pelini, leaves his post here. But, when we did college football in the fall, teams that had coaching changes, system changes, they really had to make do with nothing but Zoom meetings all the way through until September, October. Here, they've had some Zoom meetings for Youngstown State, and they had the benefit of some on-field practice in these new systems. Now, it's not a lot, and I'm not going to put a lot of weight into it, but it is a hair bit different for teams that are playing in the spring that are learning new systems, because they do have a chance to try and learn how to execute it on the field in practice sessions. That wasn't really available for the majority of teams in FBS fall football. Here, I don't think Youngstown State, the last team you want to come out of the chute and play when you're in this type of situation is North Dakota State. Now, we've seen some movement toward the Youngstown State side, and I would say, Matt, that's all because Trey Lance is gone. In fact, there's 11 players gone from North Dakota State. There are others. Offensive tackle Dylan Radens, who is actually, I was looking at some NFL draft mock drafts earlier. He's actually rated as a top 40 prospect. So you lose your best offensive tackle, who's probably going to go within 2 rounds of the draft. Jabril Cox, who was their best linebacker, went to LSU last year for the season. Adam Cofield, their best running back, to Western Kentucky. All that being said, they have the replacement parts to fill these voids. And I don't know that North Dakota State falls off a cliff here. At least in my power ratings, I didn't adjust them that way to fall off a cliff in their season opener. Zeb Norland is a guy who's actually been in the system. When he transferred for Iowa State, he got a year as the backup here, or a year to learn the system. So he'll be ready to go. It's a 23-year-old quarterback. A lot of times in other sports, we talk about BYU and how old they are and how mature it helps them become as teams. But a 23-year-old quarterback can be a pretty calming force. Not much of a runner. It's a little different than Trey Lance was, right? You're going to see more of drop back passing here out of Norland. And I wouldn't be surprised to see North Dakota State play calling percentages sway a little bit in that direction. We know they're a traditional style offense all the time, but when you have a throwing quarterback, you can pick it up 5-6% with pass calls. I think that'll be what we'll see out of North Dakota State. And if that happens, they just become more explosive. Their defense is still going to be lights out. I don't envy Youngstown State being in this position coming into the Fargo Dome. I don't agree with the fact that the lines come down here. My power ratings made it 26, which was pretty close to the opener of 25. Maybe there's some value here in North Dakota State. They have this tendency to not only create margin, but extend margin in the second half. To win this game by 24, let's say 34-10, 31-7, not out of the realm of possibility at all.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially in the FCS level, they see the Fargo Dome, they hear North Dakota State, and they're already down 14-0 before the game even begins because they're already doubting themselves. 50% capacity for this game, 9,000 fans, and in that building, that will carry because I've seen and watched several games. Even when it's full, it's really loud, but I've heard how good it is, and so certainly 50% is still going to make a huge difference. All right, so as we wrap things up here for our first FCS football edition, we usually do on videos like this best bets, but as we've said, there's going to be situations where we may not make plays until game of. So I'm going to change it up a little bit, Rob, in terms of give me a game or a side that you're looking at. You may not necessarily fire on it right now, but you want the watchers to be aware of something Saturday morning if something happens involving this team.
The game I'm looking at, in truth, Matt, was Tarleton State, New Mexico State. After Tarleton State obviously has the game under their belt, that was a really good offensive performance for a team just climbing into this division against McNeese State, a polished product, so to speak, with a returning quarterback. The total of 59.5 to me was the first thing I looked at. I think that game can make it over. I would certainly, as I continue to look into that, lean that way over. I think there'll be plenty of points. New Mexico State should be rather good offensively this season as well. One thing I'll say, not from a betting perspective, but as something to watch, and I don't know, and I'm pretty sure we'll be able to watch it. I think I saw that you'll be able to live stream, is Jackson State and Edward Waters on Sunday, because Jackson State, the debut of Deion Sanders and his 12 FCS transfers, guys from Auburn, from Florida, from Georgia, South Carolina, Florida State. Deion's compiled quite the roster for a SWAC team. Don't know what they'll show on Sunday against Edward Waters, but I think down the road, Jackson State's going to be an interesting watch. I think Deion's going to create quite a show down there in Mississippi with this team. So something to look for if you have nothing better to do. I know there's really good college basketball and NBA basketball on Sunday, but boy, Jackson State should be fun to watch this year, Matt. I'm interested to see what they pull out as far as offense and defense is concerned.
Yeah, it's funny. People are probably watching like, wait, New Mexico State, that's an FBS team. Yes, they're playing 3 games in this season. And I thought it was interesting. The quote that I have here is that the coach basically said, everything we're doing in the spring is geared towards that 2021 fall season. And they're one of those teams that may play starters for a half or 3 quarters and then pull guys so they can get everybody some experience. So that's something there. And then the game I'm looking at, and I got to dig a little bit more into it, but it's one of those cases we talked about in the beginning. Missouri State at home against Illinois State. Missouri State's an underdog in this game, but they played 3 games already. They lost to Oklahoma. They lost to Central Arkansas twice, but they were close games. I think that's big-time experience. By the way, Bobby Petrino's their head coach. They are a home underdog in this one, and there's not a lot of people picking them to do much. I think they might be an intriguing dog here. Illinois State would have had a really good team if they played this season like normal in the fall, but since then their starting quarterback, their top pass rusher, and their best cornerback all transferred out or left the program. They have 1 All-American left. It's an offensive tackle, Drew Himmelman. I think there's a chance that at least early on, Missouri State, because they had that fall experience, can get in there against Illinois State. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that game real quick before we wrap things up.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. Again, just based on the availability or the games played last fall, I think that's a big help, Matt. And when you're playing the MVC or MVFC, games, there's tough enough games on the horizon for you. I realize each team's only playing 8, and you won't play everybody in the league, I don't think. But still, North Dakota State, Northern Iowa, South Dakota State teams we talk about, those games are tough. If you can get one right off the bat where your talent is equal to the other side, then you try and get those. So Missouri State should actually be a really good look here.
All right, so that'll wrap things up for this week's show, and certainly we want you guys to be involved. Every week we're going to do about 3 to 5 games, and we'll focus in, and maybe we'll do a little bit of a look back on some of the matchups. You can find Rob on WagerTalk.com. Follow him on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports. I'm Mid-Major Matt. I'm on Sports Memo. You can follow me at Mid-Major Matt. Tweet us if you have any games that you want us to touch on. But really excited for this upcoming FCS football season, and we'll be here with you every week to preview it. For Rob Veno of WagerTalk.com, I'm Mid-Major Matt of SportsMemo.com. Talk to you again next week.